Moving into the key players, starting with New South Wales. It's pretty obvious who New South Wales' key player is. The captain, he's been, one of their stars for a long time, and that's James Tedesco. I think it's almost been overlooked that he was not taken out, but, he was forced out of Game 3, 20 minutes into it, and that was after scoring a try as well in the first 10 minutes. So, not saying that's the only reason Queensland won. They obviously had a great series, but that obviously played a big factor. In Game 1 and 2, he combined for a whopping 539 metres with a post-contact average of just below 100. So I think in Game 1 he had about 70 metres post-contact. Game 2 he had about 120. So that's pretty ridiculous for a fullback for those post-contact metres. They obviously have a lot of metres from kick returns, but 539 in Origin as well. That's just unheard of. So that's something that Queensland definitely have to look to manage this year, because obviously they didn't have to manage it in Game 3 because he was injured. So that's something that they're going to have to address. And if he's, getting 250, 300 metres a game, it's going to be hard to stop this New South Wales team playing off the back of that. So that's something they're going to have to work on, especially with their kicking game. They're going to have to look to, and sounds crazy to say, but they're going to have to look to kick to To'o and Addo-Carr as opposed to Tedesco, because his returns are just too dangerous, and they've got to try and limit his touches around the ball in the ruck as well, limiting offloads down the middle and stuff like that. So that's going to be something that Queensland will definitely be focusing on in their camp. And Teddy's not in the greatest of club form, but when it comes to New South Wales, he is a different beast. The other two key players I'll be highlighting for the New South Wales Blues are the two Panthers debutants, Brian To'o and Jerome Luai. I know it sounds corny me addressing these two as a group, but there is definitely a reason for that. I'm sure we're going to hear a lot about their bromance on Wednesday night, but on the field, they're serious players as well. Don't let their off-field personalities take away from that. And they're going to be huge if New South Wales are going to win this series or not, if you know what I mean. To'o has to fill the boots of Daniel Tupou, who was arguably one of New South Wales' best players last year, being in their top 2 metre gainers in each game in last year's series. And based on NRL form, this shouldn't be an issue for Brian To'o. He's been the most dominant kick returner and metre gainer in all of the competition, averaging over 230 metres. I think it is something ridiculous like that. And this shouldn't be an issue for To'o because it comes so naturally to him, but the Origin's a different game. Defence is a lot stronger, and it's going to be interesting to see if he can replicate those kind of stats in the Origin arena. And you could argue that his last couple of weeks, he's slowed down a little bit in terms of that aspect, so maybe teams have started to work him out, and Queensland might implement some of those strategies going into this game, but To'o definitely has to find a way to have a huge impact coming out of the back end for New South Wales. Give his forwards a break in those first 2 tackles of the set. Him and Teddy and Addo-Carr will be huge in returning the ball for the Blues. Jerome Luai is another one that's really important for this Blues team. A lot of talk about that number 6 selection. People wanted Jack White in there. Some people wanted Cody Walker there. And the 6 has probably been an issue for us since James Maloney potentially in 2016, 2015 when James Maloney was good. And Luai, what his job is, he's probably not going to take over the game and dominate, but what he's got to do is take pressure off the other stars in the New South Wales team. Blokes like James Tedesco, Turbo and Latrell are going to be all there as creative weapons, but where Luai comes into it is taking the burden off Nathan Cleary, and that comes in terms of ball playing and kicking. And Luai is the perfect man for that because he does that exact thing at club level. Cody Walker was almost a no-show last year when he played and replaced Luke Keary after he was injured after Game 1. And this is somewhere where the Blues can definitely strengthen into this year's series. And if Luai can bring that dominance from clubland and resemble any form of it in New South Wales, I think they're going to be almost unstoppable. His ability just to put the finishing touches on a great set-up play, leads the comp in try assist, very good at dropping in forced dropouts, and that's something that we will talk about later and something that New South Wales are very good at and will be very important into their success. Looking at the Queensland side of things, the keys here are Cameron Munster and Harry Grant. They've rarely been spotted this year for the Melbourne Storm, both having injuries at certain points of the season, and I have to say they were the only two reasons why Queensland won that series last year. I know it was a great team effort and they had a lot of role players like Kirk Capewell and Dane Gagai play really well, but if it wasn't for Munster and Grant in Game 3, there's no way they would have got over the line. I think Munster's performance in Game 3 is probably, if not, I can't think of anything that rivals it really. I think it's the greatest performance I've ever seen from a single player in a rugby league game. He was just incredible in every single aspect he did. He was creating so many chances. His kicking game was great. He was just awesome. Munster doing Munster things really. And Grant similarly did not. He held his own. He scored a try, created 2 line breaks, and also put on 2 line breaks for others. And for Queensland to win, these two are definitely going to be influential, and it's going to be interesting to see their fitness. We know these two, when they're fully fit, they're 2 of the best players in the comp, probably if not the 2 best. However, they are coming into it with injury clouds. People didn't know if both were going to play. Marnie's been axed from the squad, so Harry Grant's going to be right to play the full 80, which is very interesting. Hasn't played full 80 minutes for about 9 months. And Munster hasn't played for about 6 weeks for the Melbourne Storm. So that's going to be something very interesting to watch, how they step up in the Origin arena, because we know Origin, if you're playing at 80-85%, it's going to be very, very hard to play well and dominate the game like they did in Game 3. Other Queenslanders that are going to have a huge impact are Christian Welch and Jai Arrow. One of the big absentees for the Maroons side this year is Josh Papali'i. And Welch and Arrow are going to have to fill his shoes. Welch didn't have the greatest campaigns last year. He was out of Game 1 through concussion early, missed Game 2 because of that, and then Game 3 didn't have the impact, despite his team's win, that he may have wanted. Jai Arrow had a pretty good year, to be honest. He was pretty good off the bench, and he was probably the Maroons' second best forward behind Papali'i. However, this year's a different story. Arrow's now a Rabbitoh. Welch has become one of the game's best front rowers for the Storm, and they're both in incredible form, and they're in a very good position in their career to fill the shoes of Papali'i. And this is somewhere where Queensland definitely have a competitive advantage over New South Wales, in my opinion. I think the New South Wales middle forwards, albeit great players in their own rights, I think that's definitely the weakness of the New South Wales team with such strengths all over the park. But I think that's somewhere where Welch and Jai Arrow can definitely dominate the likes of Daniel Saifidi, Isaiah Yeo, and Jake Trbojevic. So they're going to be huge. If they can give the likes of Harry Grant and Cam Munster fast ball and second phase play, Queensland's going to be near unstoppable. So that's something New South Wales definitely have to address, especially when these two have the ball in their hands. They have to limit the offloads, slow the ruck down, and for Queensland it's the exact opposite. They have to make sure they're trying to get that second phase play cracking and get fast play the balls. How each team will win it.
It's a miracle! Oh yeah! What about that one? Unbelievable! Balotelli, Aguero! Crowd cheers. Here's Siddle.